Hey, look who just walked into the wrong streets of Naples. A local gang thinks they've found an easy target, a Korean man on vacation with the woman he loves, walking hand in hand as if the world owes them nothing. They don't know his name is Jin, or that he's the man who was supposed to be dead years ago. The gang laughs, brandishing knives and bats, seeing only a wealthy tourist and the delicate woman clinging to his arm. What they don't realize is that Jin spent his life mastering survival in shadows, protecting himself and everyone he cared about from people who would kill without a second thought. And tonight, under the flickering streetlights, the gang is about to discover that love can make a man more dangerous than they ever imagined. Before we go any further, comment where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because what happens next is a story you won't forget. 72 hours before that moment on the floor, Jin and So-yeon were walking along the southern coast, like any ordinary couple, trying to escape the weight of life for a few stolen days. She lifted her phone every few steps, capturing the sea as if it were something alive, something she could take home and keep. She laughed at little things, the uneven stones beneath her sandals, the way the wind pushed her hair into her face, the taste of the lemon gelato she insisted Jin try even though he claimed he didn't like sweets. To anyone watching, she was the free spirit and he was the quiet shadow beside her. But what she didn't know was that Jin's eyes were never still. While she filmed the sunset, he studied reflections in shop windows. While she admired paintings displayed outside small galleries, he counted how many people lingered too long behind them. He wasn't paranoid. He was trained to notice danger before it arrived, trained to sense when someone's interest wasn't innocent. Peace, for him, was an act he performed for her sake, and she had no idea how much effort it took him to play that role. So-yeon believed she had found a man who was gentle, patient, and composed, a man who listened more than he spoke and held her hand like he feared she might disappear if he didn't. She didn't know he held on that way, because she was the only softness he had left. Jin had spent years living like a ghost, moving through cities where his name was whispered but never written, trusting no one, loving no one, and expecting nothing beyond survival. Meeting her felt like stumbling into sunlight when you've lived too long underground. She became the one thing he wanted to protect even from himself. And yet, even here, on this beautiful coastline, he felt a quiet pressure in his chest, a sense that the past rarely stays buried, especially for men like him. Across the street, inside a dim cafe, a group of men noticed them before Jin noticed them. They whispered among themselves, nudging each other, pointing at the way. So-yeon leaned into him with trust, at the camera hanging loosely from her wrist, at the polished watch on Jin's hand. To them, they didn't look like two people trying to rebuild their lives. Their laughter reached the street, low and mocking, the kind that follows people who believe they will never be held accountable. But hidden beneath that laughter was something else, resentment, an irritation that someone like Jin walked by without acknowledging them, without lowering his eyes or stepping aside. Their leader, Luca, especially hated that. He sat at the edge of the cafe table, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who thought the streets belonged to him. Luca had a rule he repeated often, one every man under him understood clearly. Never let disrespect go unanswered. To him, respect wasn't earned, it was taken. And he believed Jin had disrespected him simply by existing in a space Luca wanted to dominate. No words had been exchanged, no confrontation had taken place, but Luca had already decided who Jin was and how he deserved to be treated. He saw an outsider, walking comfortably, in a place where he wanted fear to live. He saw a couple absorbing the beauty of the city while he thrived on its ugliness. In his world, that alone was enough reason to mark someone as a target. What Luca didn't know was that Jin felt the shift the moment it happened. He didn't turn his head or break his expression, but something inside him tightened. His step slowed for half a second, and So-yeon noticed just enough to ask if he was tired. He told her he was fine, but deep down, a familiar awareness was rising. The same awareness he had learned to trust more than he trusted his own heartbeat. He wished, just for a moment, that he could ignore it, that he could let her enjoy this trip without shadows. But men like Jin don't get to wish for simple things. They only get to prepare for what's coming. If you were in his shoes walking with someone you love, realizing danger is moving toward you while they remain blissfully unaware. What would you do? Would you tell them the truth? Or pretend nothing was wrong just to preserve their smile a little longer? The first mistake happened in the crowded morning market, a place filled with the smell of fresh bread and the sound of vendors calling out prices. Jin and So-Yun walked between the stalls, and for a moment it almost felt peaceful, almost felt normal, until Jin caught a reflection in a metal tray displayed at a butcher's stand. Behind them, too close to be coincidence, Luca's men drifted in like smoke, pretending to browse. One paused by a fruit stand. Another lingered near a stack of handbags, but Jin recognized the rhythm instantly. Predators always move in patterns, and these men were forming a half-circle without realizing their intentions were already exposed. So-Yun sensed it too, though she didn't understand why. She tugged lightly on Jin's arm and asked if something was wrong. He told her no, but his voice carried a firmness she wasn't used to. She studied his face, noticing a tension in his jaw she hadn't seen before, and it planted a quiet fear in her chest, one she tried to hide behind a soft smile. Luca watched from a distance, leaning against a wall as if the whole market belonged to him. His plan was simple: bump into Jin, insult him loudly, push him in front of the crowd, and humiliate him enough to feel satisfied. But when he stepped forward, the crowd parted in a way he didn't expect, leaving him standing directly in front of Jin, less than an arm's length away. For a man like Luca, this was supposed to be the moment he delivered fear. Instead, something entirely different happened. Jin didn't step back. He didn't flinch. He looked at Luca with a calm so absolute that it made Luca hesitate for the first time. One of Luca's men shoved Jin's shoulder, confident they could overwhelm him quickly. But Jin shifted just enough that the shove lost its force, leaving the man stumbling. No one noticed the movement except Luca, but it was enough to make him realize this wasn't an ordinary tourist. He pressed his tongue against his teeth, annoyed, embarrassed, and suddenly aware that his men were watching him fail at something that should have been easy. So-Yun saw the shove and grabbed Jin's arm, whispering his name in a voice trembling with worry. Jin touched her hand gently, a gesture meant to calm her, but his eyes remained fixed on Luca's reflection in a polished steel counter nearby. He didn't want to make a scene, not here, not with her beside him, but the situation had already begun to tilt in a dangerous direction. He counted exits, calculated distances, and reviewed the posture of each man surrounding them. Every detail etched itself into his mind. In an instant, the weighted jacket of the man behind him, the trembling hand of the younger one to his left, the box cutter tucked behind the fruit stand. These were small observations to anyone else, but to Jin they were warnings written in bold letters. Even So-Yun, without understanding who he truly was, felt his body tense like a drawn bow and whispered again, asking if they should leave. Her voice cracked slightly, letting him know she was fighting the urge to panic. Luca, frustrated by the failed shove, tried to provoke Jin again by reaching for So-Yun's wrist, intending to frighten her into dropping her camera. But that was the moment everything changed. Jin moved with a speed that was nearly invisible, blocking Luca's hand without touching him, stepping just slightly forward, placing himself between So-Yun and the entire group. To the market crowd, it looked like a simple step. Nothing more. But Luca felt something in that moment, an unspoken warning that made his stomach tighten. Jin's eyes held no anger, no fear, only a cold precision that seemed impossible for a man pretending to be a tourist. The humiliation of failing twice in front of his men burned Luca's pride, pushing him into a reckless anger he couldn't hide. He spat an insult under his breath, but Jin didn't respond. He simply guided So-Yun away from the stalls, his hand firm on her shoulder, while Luca's men struggled to understand why their leader couldn't break this stranger with a single shove. As they walked downhill toward a quieter street, So-Yun finally asked what was happening. Jin told her it was nothing, but the lie felt heavy even as he spoke it. She didn't press him, though her eyes filled with questions she was too afraid to voice. She sensed he was hiding something bigger than just a bad interaction with rude locals. Jin hated that she could feel it. He wanted to give her a version of life, untouched by violence, untouched by his past, but moments like this revealed the truth: he could leave the world he came from, but that world would never stop hunting him. And now, without knowing it, So-yeon was caught in its path. If you were So-yeon, feeling the shift in the person you loved, sensing fear without explanation, seeing strangers watching you with hate, would you demand the truth or hold on to the hope that everything would be okay? The market was alive, with noise vendors shouting prices, tourists bargaining, the scent of spices drifting through the air. It was the kind of place where people brushed past each other without looking, where a wrong step meant nothing. And that was exactly why Luca chose it. The chaos made it easy to hide bad intentions beneath casual movement. Jin and So-yeon walked slowly, admiring handmade jewelry and baskets of fresh oranges, unaware, at least in So-yeon's case, of the shadows trailing them. Luca sent two of his men ahead, nudging them with a look that said everything. They understood the gesture. Bump the girl first. Make her drop something. Make her flinch. Make her scared. But the moment one of them stepped toward her, Jin's entire presence shifted. He didn't raise his voice, didn't break the rhythm of his steps. He simply moved his hand in a brief, subtle motion, placing himself slightly in front of So-yeon, angling his shoulder just perfectly. The man didn't hit her, he ran directly into Jin instead. And before he could react, Jin caught his wrist as if steadying him. To anyone watching, it looked polite, almost apologetic. But beneath the surface, the gang member felt something he didn't expect. A sudden pressure tightening around his bones. A sharp, stinging twist. The quiet crack of a joint being forced out of place. His breath hitched, his face drained of color, but Jin held him upright so no one would notice. Then, just as quickly, he let go, stepping away as if nothing had happened. The man clutched his wrist, unable to process how it snapped so effortlessly in the grip of someone who didn't even seem angry. Luca saw everything. The failed bump, the shaky expression of his man trying not to cry out, the woman who never even knew she'd been targeted. And worst of all, for Luca, the calm on Jin's face. No fear, no confusion, no apology. Just serenity. A kind of serenity that only comes from someone who has been on the edge of violence long enough to know how to pull back from it with perfect control. So-yeon sensed it too. She felt the shift in Jin's body, the coldness in the way he moved, the sharpness of his gaze. It confused her, because this wasn't the gentle man she shared quiet dinners with, the man who held her hand like it was something delicate. This was someone else, someone precise, calculating, and entirely unreadable. She tried to search his face for reassurance, for any sign that she was imagining the tension, but Jin kept his expression neutral. And that neutrality scared her more than anything. She whispered his name, asking if everything was fine. But he told her yes, with a tone so controlled it didn't feel like the truth. He guided her forward, shoulders relaxed, steps steady, yet every part of him was measuring distance, exits, and threats. Luca took a slow breath, trying to calm the humiliation burning through his pride. He had seen men lose their nerve before, but never to a stranger who hadn't even thrown a punch. One of his men leaned in to whisper, asking if they should attack now, but Luca shook his head. Not yet. Not here. This wasn't just about teaching a lesson anymore. This was about restoring his ego. And for men like Luca, ego was fuel. Fuel strong enough to make them misread the moment entirely. Because, in that crowded market, Jin didn't fight. He calculated. He weighed every motion, every reaction, and every consequence of revealing who he truly was. And Luca mistook that restraint for weakness, the deadliest misreading of his life. If you were in So-yeon's place, watching the person you love turn into someone you don't recognize for just a few seconds, would you trust their silence or demand the truth? The villa was supposed to be their safe place, a quiet sanctuary tucked into a hillside above the water. So-yeon loved the way the lanterns glowed at night and how the ocean breeze slipped through the open windows. She believed they had finally escaped whatever tension haunted the market earlier. Jin let her believe it, even though he felt the unease deepening with every hour. He didn't want to frighten her. He wanted her to sleep in peace. But peace doesn't last long when danger has already chosen its target. Sometime after midnight, a soft, metallic click echoed through the living room. A sound most people would sleep through. A sound thieves rely on. But Jin heard it instantly. His eyes opened before his mind was fully awake. His body reacting on instinct. He didn't breathe. He listened. A slow creak followed. A footstep. Then another. Someone was inside. Jin touched So-Yen's arm gently, hoping not to alarm her, but she felt the stiffness in his posture and woke up in an instant. Her voice whispered his name, trembling slightly, but Jin lifted a finger to his lips without taking his eyes off the bedroom door. She had never seen him like this, completely still, completely controlled, yet coiled like a spring ready to launch. In that moment, he shifted into someone she had never met before. His entire presence changed. His breathing slowed. His steps made no sound. His eyes sharpened into something almost inhuman. It terrified her because it didn't look like fear, it looked like preparation. A kind of preparation that only comes from someone who has been here before. So-Yen's heart pounded, but Jin moved with a calm that felt impossible. He opened the drawer beside the bed and took out nothing more than a small metal pen, holding it lightly between his fingers. Not a weapon, but in his hands, it might as well have been. For the first time, So-Yen saw the man she loved become someone she did not know. Two shadows slipped into the hallway, whispering in a foreign accent, confident and careless. They thought Jin was asleep. They thought the break-in would be simple. They thought they were dealing with a frightened tourist who wouldn't understand what was happening until it was too late. But when the first intruder pushed open the bedroom door, Jin was already beside him. What happened next was silent, precise, and terrifying. Jin grabbed the man's forearm, twisted, and the intruder dropped instantly to his knees without understanding how he got there. Before he could scream, Jin pressed his neck in a way that cut off his breath just long enough to silence him, then eased him to the floor. The second intruder froze. His eyes fell on Jin's bare shoulder as Jin's shirt shifted, revealing a tattoo he hadn't meant to show. Black ink, sharp lines, a symbol most people would never recognize, but the intruder did. His face drained instantly. He stepped backward like a man, realizing he'd trespassed into the wrong world. His hand shook as he reached into his pocket, not for a weapon, but for his phone. He typed with frantic fingers, eyes never leaving Jin. A message sent in seconds, delivered across borders, into the dark corners of criminal networks. We didn't attack a tourist. We attacked a ghost from Seoul. That was the moment everything escalated beyond Luca's control. The moment the story changed from a petty attack on a couple to a war with a man they should have never touched. So-Yen watched Jin kneel beside the intruder, speaking in a low, measured voice she barely recognized. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shaking. He was calm, too calm. And when he stood and closed the door, he turned to her with an apologetic look, the kind that carried a truth she wasn't ready to accept. The man she loved had a past, a violent one, a hidden one, a past that had now found them. If you discovered the person you love carried a history dangerous enough to make strangers tremble, would you run or would you stay? In the quiet after the storm, when the echoes of broken furniture and shattered glass finally settled, another silence rose between them, a heavier one. A silence made of truths Jin never wanted to speak, and truths So-Yen never wanted to hear. So-Yen stood at the edge of the ruined villa, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from something far more painful, disbelief. The man she loved, the man who laughed softly in the mornings, who brushed a leaf out of her hair as if she were made of glass, had suddenly moved like a shadow sharpened into steel. She looked at Jin the way someone looks at a stranger wearing a familiar face. And Jin could not meet her eyes. There are wounds that come from bullets, knives, and fists. And then there are wounds made by secrets. The latter bleed slower, and they hurt longer. So-Yen's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. Jin, who are you? and Jin felt something inside him fracture. The silent dragon could survive torture, bullets, betrayal, and death. But not her tears. He didn't lie. Not completely. He didn't have the strength for full honesty. But he had even less strength to see her break. So he gave her the truth that hurt the least. There are people from my past, people who want me gone. Just enough to explain the fear. Not enough to explain the blood. So Yen swallowed hard. Your past came for us, didn't it? And Jin nodded. A slow, doomed nod that sealed both their fates. Because what he didn't tell her, what he couldn't tell her, was that the past wasn't chasing him. It was hunting him. And miles away, in a dim room filled with smoke and cheap ambition, Luca stared at the message his men retrieved from the mercenary. A bounty notice. A number so high it made his throat dry. The kind of number you don't see unless the man you're hunting is either royalty or a monster. To Luca, Jin was no longer a rival, no longer a humiliation, no longer the quiet boyfriend of the woman he wanted. No, he was a jackpot, a walking fortune, a prize he could claim, if he survived long enough to grab it. And that thought, that hunger, corrupted him deeper than greed. It rewired him. Because some men chase love, and some chase power. But Luca decided he would chase the ghost of soul, even if he had to burn down the entire coast to catch him. And while Luca's obsession sharpened into something deadly, So-yeon looked at Jin one last time, her heart shattering quietly. Sometimes, the worst betrayal is realizing the person you trusted most was never just one person. And Jin knew in that fragile moment that the lie he tried to bury had begun to bleed open, and once truth starts bleeding, it never stops. There are mistakes, and then there are choices so catastrophic, they rewrite the fate of every soul involved. And Luca, drunk on greed, fear, and the hunger to matter, was about to make the second kind. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He didn't leave the city like any sane man would after learning Jin's true identity. No, Luca did the unthinkable. He reached out to the silent dragons, the syndicate Jin once served, once feared, and once bled for. A call routed through encrypted channels, black market brokers, and whispers so dangerous that most men die before finishing the sentence. And somewhere in Europe, behind a frosted glass office that overlooked nothing, not a city, not a skyline, not even daylight, a woman picked up the dragon's European liaison, Clara G., a woman known by a name spoken only in fear. Winter. Her voice held no warmth, no emotion, no humanity. It was the kind of voice that made grown men straighten their posture and forget how to breathe. Luca expected threats. He expected rage. He expected death slipping silently through the line. But what he got was worse. A pause, cold, calculated, measuring him like a butcher measures meat. And then, you have information about him. Not Jin, not Mr. Han, just him, the ghost, the runaway, the dragon who broke the only rule the syndicate truly cares about. No one leaves. And in that moment, Luca didn't realize he wasn't negotiating. He wasn't bargaining. He wasn't even surviving. He was being marked. The moment he contacted the dragons, his fate was sealed. A non-survivable mistake. Because the silent dragons do not outsource, they do not partner, and they do not forgive anyone who touches what belongs to them. And Jin was theirs. Winter didn't want him dead. No, death was mercy. She wanted him returned, and when a syndicate wants someone returned, it means the body comes back breathing, but the spirit never does. Meanwhile, Jin and So-yeon sat in a dim room lit only by the flicker of a dying bulb, her eyes still swollen from tears, his hands still shaking from the truth he'd tried and failed to hide. He could feel it. The world tightening around him. The old life he buried, clawing its way back through the dirt. And far away, Clara Winter closed the encrypted message Luca sent. Coordinates, faces, the crude desperation of a man who thought he could weaponize information. She exhaled slowly, cold fog against colder air, and whispered into the darkness. Found you. A death sentence. Softly spoken. Inevitable. But before the storm came crashing down, before the streets burned with alliances and broken loyalties. The narrator's voice lowers, sharpens, becomes a warning. If you're still with us, comment, "I see the dragon." Because what happens next is the beginning of war. A war Jin never wanted. A war So-yeon never deserved. A war Luca would not survive. And the war the silent dragons had been waiting years to finish. There are screams the world hears. And then there are the quiet ones. The kind only one man is meant to answer. So-yeon never saw them coming. A van, a hand, a muffled cry swallowed by the night. And like all cowards, Luca's men didn't fight Jin. They stole the one thing he would burn universes to protect. Minutes later, Jin's phone vibrated. A message, a link. He tapped it, and the room fell silent. So-yeon, tied to a chair, trembling, a bruise blooming on her cheek. Behind her, Luca's men laughed. The kind of laugh that only exists when a man thinks he's already won. The camera shook as one thug leaned forward, sneering. "You took one of ours. Now we take one of yours. Come alone, or we start carving." Then the video cut. The world held its breath. Jin did not. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He didn't panic. He stood, slowly, calmly, like a storm deciding where to strike first. Something ancient woke inside him. Not rage, not revenge, but the cold, merciless instinct of the man he once was. The silent dragon. His breathing slowed. His pupils sharpened. Every muscle in his body aligned with a purpose nature itself would not dare interrupt. His whisper was barely audible. "You took the wrong woman." And the world would feel its breath. Every man has a past, but Jin's past didn't sleep. It circled above him like a predatory bird. Tonight, that bird returned. Kestrel, a myth whispered in back alleys and old syndicate ruins. A man who vanished years ago, leaving only rumors behind. The last remnant of Jin's darkest days. Jin found him exactly where ghosts tend to hide. In a forgotten fishing shack off the coast, lit only by a single lantern. The door creaked open. Kestrel didn't flinch, didn't turn, didn't ask why Jin was there. He simply said, "Finally stopped running?" Jin nodded once, and with that, the past reopened. Kestrel led him to a trunk buried beneath floorboards. A relic from another lifetime. Inside, the tools Jin had sworn never to touch again. Knives balanced to the gram, a suppressed sidearm wrapped in old cloth, a black leather harness marked with faint dragon sigils, and at the very bottom, a ring etched with the silent dragon crest. Jin's hand trembled as he lifted it, not from fear, from acceptance. He strapped on each weapon with ritualistic precision. An unholy ceremony. The rebirth of a ghost. Kestrel watched, eyes unreadable. "You know what happens if they get here first," he murmured. Jin nodded. The silent dragons were already moving. Winter's order spiraled through the syndicate like a cold wind. Cut to men in suits boarding private planes. Cargo crates stamped with dragon insignias being loaded. Guns assembled in dim red light. Coordinates glowing on encrypted tablets. A ticking clock. They weren't coming to save him. They were coming to reclaim him, and everything he touched. Jin stepped out of the shack, the ocean wind whipping through his hair, weapons hidden beneath his coat. Kestrel spoke from the doorway. "So what's your plan?" Jin didn't turn around. "I'm not trying to win." He looked toward the dark cliffs where Luca's men waited with So-yeon. "I'm trying to end this. Before my old brothers arrive." A beat. Cold. Terrifying. Final. If the dragons reach her, they won't burn just Luca. He clenched his fists. They'll burn the world around her. And for the first time since he left Seoul, Jin wasn't thinking about survival. He was thinking about love. Love that demanded war. Love that required death. Love that would turn the night red. And the man who'd spent years running finally walked toward the fight. There are fights a man trains for, and there are fights a man is destined for. Tonight, Jin walked into the latter. The compound sat on the cliff's edge, a rusted maze of shipping containers, floodlights, and armed men patrolling with arrogance they hadn't earned. Jin stepped through the shadows first. Kestrel followed behind, quiet as a lingering ghost. Jin moved like memory. Like violence he'd rehearsed in nightmares. A guard turned. Too slow, Jin's forearm locked around his throat. Silent. Efficient. Another reached for a radio. A knife left Jin's hand before the man could speak. Crack. Drop. Silence. Kestrel didn't fight like a human being. He fought like a question the world could not answer. No grunts, no breathing. Just the dull thud of bodies hitting the dirt in his wake. But Jin fought differently. Every strike was fueled not by hatred, but by fear. Fear of losing the woman whose absence felt like being carved open from the inside. If Jin died tonight, So-Yun would die with him. Every second mattered. Every heartbeat was a countdown. He reached the inner chamber. A metal door, voices behind it. So-Yun's voice. Shaking, begging, trying to buy Jin time she didn't have. He kicked the door open. Luca stood behind her, smirking, a gun pressed against her temple. Look at you, Luca laughed. Sweating, desperate, human. He lifted So-Yun's chin with the barrel of the gun. A man like you doesn't get to love. The world won't allow it. For a breath, Jin froze. A single breath. And that was all Kestrel needed. Crack. The gunshot echoed through the compound, shattering Luca's sentence in half. Luca collapsed, blood blooming across his shoulder. Not dead. Not yet. Kestrel lowered his rifle, expression unreadable. So Jin could make his move and end this. Jin rushed to So-Yun, his hands trembling for the first time all night. She fell into his arms, sobbing, gripping his shirt like she feared he might fade if she let go. I've got you, he whispered. Words he'd never dared say before. Words he now needed her to believe. Behind them, Luca gasped, laughing through the pain. You saved her, but you can't save yourself. He wasn't wrong. At least, not entirely. When the fighting ended, Jin stepped outside, into the cold ocean wind that carried both freedom and consequence. He dialed a number burned into his soul, a number he had sworn never to call again. Chairman Quan, the man who commanded the Silent Dragons, the man who owned Jin's past, his future, and the weight of his name. Jin spoke, but we do not hear the words, only the silence between them, a silence long enough to alter destinies. Minutes later, an encrypted message rippled through the syndicate. Kill order revoked. Stand down. Just like that. The hunters retreated. Jin had bought peace. But what he paid to earn it, the world may never know. And maybe, that is the true cost of love. Jin and So-Yun vanished into the clouds, leaving the cliffs and the burning compound behind. Two souls stitched together by fear, by loyalty, by a love sharp enough to draw blood. Every step they took was weighted with the echoes of choices made in darkness, and the knowledge that safety was never guaranteed. They were alive. Yes, but survival carried scars no healing could fully erase. The war had ended, or at least the part they could see. But the darkness Jin had invited back into his life, the shadows he had awakened with one call, one bullet, one choice, they would never sleep again. And now we are left with the question, did Jin save their future, or destroy it bit by bit, even as he held them close? Tell us, how would you have acted in his place? Could love justify the storm he unleashed? Or was the cost far too great? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story consumed you, hit like and subscribe for more tales where love meets the underworld.